Hello, I'm Arik Korman, Communications Director at League of Education Voters, and the parent of a fifth grade son in the public school system who needs special education services. In case you're not familiar with us, League of Education Voters is a statewide nonprofit working with families, educators, and leaders to build a brighter future for every Washington student. Our website is educationvoters.org. We believe that education is a tool for justice. One of the systems that perpetrate racial injustice experienced by communities of color is our schools. We believe every child deserves an excellent public education that provides an equal opportunity for success. In order to achieve this, we must pursue radical change in our school systems for equity, justice, and liberation. We must build schools and systems that honor the humanity in every student. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime LEVinars. We started this series 7 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. Today's LEVinar is about what students need for going back to school. And we are honored to have Washington State Teachers of the Year, Amy Campbell from 2020, Robert Hand from 2019, Mandy Manning from 2018, and the 2018 National Teacher of the Year, Camille Jones from 2017, and Nate Bowling from 2016 with us. These are unprecedented times in Washington State. School districts are finalizing plans for reopening schools, and many have chosen online and hybrid learning models. But now and how have the COVID-19 school closures impacted students? And how can we best support them in the fall? In this webinar, the Washington State Teachers of the Year will share what they are hearing from students, parents, and colleagues in their community. We'll share what students need to begin the 2020-2021 school year, and we'll answer your questions. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This is the space for you to submit questions to us. As always, feel free to send any feedback about the webinar quality to us on the chat function or at info@educationvoters.org. Welcome, Washington State Teachers of the Year. I am so honored to have you here. Amy, Robert, Camille, Mandy, and Nate, you guys are all rock stars. I don't want to, I guess I can't say how much I appreciate you. You are some of the most inspiring people that I have ever met in my entire life, and I am so glad you're here with us today. I wanted to start by saying, what are you hearing right now from your colleagues, from your students and families in your communities? Because this time is completely unprecedented.
Anxiety. That's what I've been hearing. I've been hearing anxiety. I mean, because the reason that educators become educators is because they love to work with students, and they get, they not only get to give hope to kids, but they get to get hope from kids. And so this is a time when they're being faced with a challenge that they're being asked to do this in a way that is not comfortable and is difficult. And they're also concerned about their health and concerned about the health of their families and their students. And there's just so much. There's so much happening. And in all of it, no one is confident in what they're going to be asked or expected to do, or how they're going to be doing it. So.
Yeah, Nate, what have you been hearing? Because your perspective is different. You were out of the country for a while, and it's different channels of communication, but I'm sure you're always plugged in.
Yeah, for folks that aren't aware, I currently teach at the American Community School, which is an international school in Abu Dhabi, and that's where I am right now at time check at 11:30 at night. But I'm on a leave of absence from Tacoma schools. And so I was back in the States for a month, and I heard a lot of uncertainty from my colleagues. I heard a lot of people who really care about the work that they do and take the work seriously, who don't feel like they're being set up to be successful in that work. I think in particular about technology issues in the tech divide. I have a student teacher who replaced me, a former student teacher who replaced me at Lincoln High School when I moved overseas. And her and I shared instructions, shared assessment, shared curriculum last school year. But when we went remote, my school here is one-to-one. I was able to deliver effective online instruction. Not perfect, but well. And she really struggled. And that's not her fault. It's just a lack of tech access and issues. And that's a conversation that needs to be had that I'm not sure is being had with the urgency that I thought it would over the summer.
Yeah, Amy, what are you hearing from Camus?
Okay, so I live in Vancouver in Southwest Washington, Clark County, and I work in Camus. And I think I've spent a lot of the summer listening, just listening. And as a special education teacher, I work more directly with families who have children who experience disability within our community and in our school settings. And obviously, families who students who need this extra support were disproportionately impacted during the closure. It was even harder to figure out the accommodations, modifications, how to overcome the barriers to learning when we create a new barrier through our system of, through the way we're doing this. It's just it's problematic. So yes, hearing fear, anxiety, but then I'm also hearing people starting to come up with ideas. And I think this is just, I talk a lot about innovation, and the new special ed guidance out of the state is a great resource if you have, that all teachers should be looking at, because we all have students who have disabilities in our classrooms potentially. But it speaks to how are we being creative to serve students with unique needs. And I'm hearing parents come up with ideas. I'm hearing students come up with what might help support them. I'm hearing teachers ask questions like, I couldn't do this last year. How am I going to do it this year? And so within the fear and the anxiety, I also think that we're starting to get some more ideas.
I'll piggyback off that because I think, I totally agree with everything that everyone has said. And in addition, additional concerns similar to what Amy's talked about for early learners, and, how to make sure that they have that access, whether it's, in Quincy, where I teach in the center part of the state, it's very rural, remote, 450 square mile school district, lots of very remote families that don't even have cell connection or Wi-Fi ability where they live. So, and I actually have taken a new role over the summer. I'm going to be the district instructional technology coach. So I'm really involved with leading the team that's planning the integrations for these technology tools for next year, as well as the professional development for our staff and training and supports for students and families. And so with that, we've really tried to listen really carefully, especially to the people who had the most challenging situations in the spring, to make sure that we can solve those problems using we have kind of 3 words that are driving our solutions, which is access first, getting every single student the access that they need, support, and then growth. So that engagement and that learning is the third, the ultimate, but we have to have those other 2 pieces in place first. And what I'm hearing a lot right now, in midst of all these other things, anxiety and frustration and struggle, is also real commitment paired with that innovation that Amy was talking about. So the team that I'm working with, we have 40 teachers and 20 classified staff and family and students that are working together to figure out what are the things we need to put in place and how are we going to do that for each different teaching context, for each different family and student context. And so the amount of people that are willing to take time, a lot of time, to commit to making this the best possible experience is really encouraging.
That's great. Robert, what are you hearing up in Mount Vernon?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. A lot of what everybody said. I mean, definitely a lot of anxiety among all of us, really. I mean, we say like our families, but it's all of us, right? Because many of us have children of our own that are in schools, and we're trying to figure out as teachers how to navigate all of this, and then also like double duty with trying to figure out how our own kids are going to do with their own schooling and how we're going to do teaching, our students and working with our own children. So there's a lot of anxiety among all of us, I think, when it comes to this, and we all really, feel it. But I also think I'm hearing hope too, right? So I think for a long time, so many of us have talked about the things that we need to do in education to change our system to make sure that it equitably serves all of our students. There are so many things that we are always clamoring for that need to change. But oftentimes, until we're put into this kind of environment where we're forced to actually confront change, many times people are reticent to adopt those changes. And now it's like, well, we don't have any choice but to adapt and change to what's in front of us. And so, I mean, if I'm trying to find a silver lining, I'm looking at the hope that I'm hearing from people that, hey, this is an opportunity for us to actually look at these changes that we've been talking about, that we want to make in schools, and to really embrace them. And it's hard because right now we're trying to scramble and figure out how to do just the things, the basic things that we were doing before in a totally different way, in a remote environment with students that don't have access to the things they need. And when we're talking about doing all of that and then also rolling in all these changes at the same time, it becomes overwhelming. Like, we're looking at like totally different schedules at my school where I teach, and it's already enough trying to figure out how to teach with what I knew before, and then now adopt new schedules and totally new systems and all that. It's a lot for us to try to figure out. But I think that's what I'm trying to look at, is the hope that we have that we're not going to go back to the way things were, that we're gonna start a new normal going forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that brings me to my second question. What do students need moving forward as we do start the 2020-21 school year? I mean, obviously access to technology is huge, but I'm sure there's a lot more.
I want to jump in because I have something, if that's okay, that stands out to me, no matter who you are as a teacher, who you're serving. I think we need to really start with relationship. Like, how do we center on each student? I hear talk about concerns of learning loss and testing when kids come back, and it starts to create concern. Yes, we lost some academic learning time, but our children were still learning and having experiences. And so when we get kids back in our classrooms remotely or in person, how are we looking at each child and asking them about their experience, engaging with them, validating with them, and building and bridging? Because we're going to be in a hard situation potentially for a while. And without those relationships, without that connection, what's going to bring kids back over and over and over? We know it's hard to sit in meetings like this. And I think these are, it's going to be foundational. We talk about social emotional learning, we talk about inclusion. All of this happens as teachers build community in their classrooms. And so however that happens, remotely or in person, I would say start with relationship and know that when you have that, you'll know what children know, and you'll likely know what they don't know. And the whole community can build together. And when someone's not in class, everyone will notice that too. And hopefully that will make everything else about teaching remotely a little bit easier. No promises.
Mandy, what do you think students need that hasn't come up yet?
Well, so many things. But thinking about what Amy said about this learning loss, that's a very, very frustrating thing for me to hear, because most of the standards that we have are pretty arbitrary. In what we should be concerned about is the mental health of our students. And, because if we don't meet them where they are and help them to get through this really traumatic experience, they're not going to be able to learn anyway. And so I think we need to remove ourselves from these traditional standards of what we think school is, and really get down to what school actually is, which is building humans that are compassionate and community minded, and able to learn on their own. Because it's not about what schools are getting kids to do, it's about what are we helping them to be able to do when they are older. But the biggest thing I think that the kids need right now, aside from the relationships and ensuring that we're helping them with their mental health, is flexibility. One of the things that is very concerning to me in the plans that have come out so far is this lack of understanding that not all kids have the same level of access, whether that's internet access or technology. That's one thing that we could solve. But there's also access in terms of, is there an adult who is able to stay home all day? How many siblings are there in the house? How does the hierarchy work in the house? That does the high school student have to take care of the younger kids? Is that child now going to become the person who is helping everybody else navigate their learning online? And how is that going to impact them? So I know in Spokane schools, they're doing real-time online, which is going to be, you know, like everybody's up at 8 on their computers, school day ends at 2:30. When I think about that, I think about some of the families that were in my classroom that had, you know, 10 kids in the class. And when I ask about flexibility in this plan, I'm always met with, well, we're going to ensure that every kid has a laptop. Well, ensuring that every kid has a laptop doesn't ensure that they're all going to open that laptop and be able to get connected. And then these are supposed to be the simple things that we're solving: the internet access and the technology. We have not been able to meet that, those basic needs. We haven't been able to meet that basic need. My internet goes out 3 times a day, and I have really high speed quality internet, supposedly. We have 2 parents working at home. We have all of these things, and we're going to have a difficult time meeting that meeting that schedule. So where is the discussion in truly ensuring that every single kid is going to be able to access remote learning, and not asking them to compromise their health and the health of their family because they happen to be furthest from educational justice? This is what I keep hearing. Those kids furthest from educational justice need to be the ones that we're considering in terms of bringing them in. And I'm like, okay, all right. I want to be able to meet the kids of the needs of the kids furthest from educational justice. But does that mean that we then say to those kids, because you're furthest from educational justice, we now want you to compromise your health by coming into the building? There's so many nuances to this conversation, and equity is definitely not been central to the conversation. So I think flexibility, like, kids should be able to access the learning when they are able, and then you have to figure out, okay, then how do they communicate with us that they have actually accessed that?
That's such a good point, Mandy. And I think another piece of that is flexibility for teachers and in the scheduling that's being set for teachers. You know, if teachers want to be able to provide that support to families who are the ones, you know, the first ones that are helping their children learn from home right now. And for example, in Quincy, we're just getting ready to gear up for harvest. And most of our parents are going to be working till it's dark, you know, it's at 8 o'clock at night through the fall. And so if our teachers are going to have any opportunity to connect with families, but also be able to have some parameters around their own personal time, because that was not existent in the spring. And, you know, everyone just did what they had to do. And the teachers that I know were incredibly generous with their time to make that happen for families. But trying to consider our staff and their mental health, but also their ability to desire to make that happen for families. How can we adjust the expectations of when they're reporting to work, or what time frames they have to make that possible and manageable and sustainable, really, because we're looking at this for much longer term than we were in the spring as well. So flexibility for our students, but for our staff too.
And Nate, one thing you did as a teacher at Lincoln was creating all kinds of wraparound supports for students that you had. How do you think that could be done in this time of remote learning?
It's tough. Like, I'm sitting here right now looking at some writing I did in the fall of last year. And essentially I laid out like the 5 elements of a high functioning school for a student. And the 5 elements are engaging instruction, physical safety, extracurricular activities that are like meaningful and give opportunities for kids to explore the world of themselves, nutritious and healthy food, and facilities worth caring about. So if we look at a remote learning environment, all of a sudden in the middle of a pandemic, I can basically tick off and cross off all but one of those as being like outside of my and the school system's control. And so that's concerning to me. I have a lot of trepidation about what is going to be happening in Washington State this year. And one of the things that I think about is how the decisions are being made in the absence of teachers. One of my like points of always like policy making is is that teachers and students need to be in conversations. And I feel like in many of the school districts and areas, there's basically a committee that's meeting, and they're basically going to release a plan and say, hey, this is our plan. And that plan is not going to stand up when you push like one thing on it. And for me, it's frustrating. Nah, that's the right word. It's disheartening that I think the WIAA, who's like the State Athletics Commission, basically came out with like what their plan is for COVID and how they're going to handle sports before most districts did. Like, that's backwards. And so essentially, like, we're putting more thought right now into how we're going to have spring football than we are into how we're going to make sure kids have computers, meals, extracurricular activities, and whatever they need. And like, that is something that I'm watching happening, and I find disheartening.
Yeah, that's a great point. Robert, what would you like to see students have as the school year starts?
Where do I start? I mean, making sure that they have, you know, access, like Mandy was saying, like we've all been saying, to the technology that's needed. And I think some expectations, some flexibility. I think it's really difficult going back now, looking at how things were in the spring when it was emergency remote instruction, you know, it wasn't online teaching. Those are very different things. And we were doing the best that we could at the time. We've been doing everything we can, you know, since that time going into this now. But so what I've been hearing a lot of people ask about is like, well, are things going to be different this time than they were during that time? And obviously they are, you know, when you look at what districts are planning and how instruction is going to look. And we have synchronous instruction and asynchronous instruction and expectations that kids are going to be online at certain times. And I think that I would like, you know, like Nate said, we need to have the voices of those families and those kids at the decision table where these decisions are being made. And oftentimes that isn't happening. Definitely we need to have teacher voice anytime those decisions are happening, but like student voice and family voice, and actually going and asking the families that we're here to serve, what are the things that you need from us that we're not seeing or that we're not accomplishing to be able to make sure that you have what you need. And, you know, I hear a lot of times that, you know, we're trying to be equitable for students, and then because of that, we don't do things for people. And the reality is, like, whatever it is that we offer, whatever it is that we do, we have to make sure that we're giving equal access to everybody to be able to do those same things. Otherwise, it's a totally inequitable system that favors the people that have the access to be able to accomplish the things that we're asking. So, you know, I want to make sure that we have clear communication with families and students. I want to make sure that we have students with access to the things that they need, teachers with access to the things they need, because oftentimes that's overlooked too. It's like, you know, we're looked at as tools in a way that we have to accomplish this. And like, we're people too. We also have families that we have to consider, and other things like that, and our own health. Like I can't teach for the next, you know, 30 years or whatever if I'm dead next year, you know what I mean? So we have to be able to look at teachers as people that have families, and then look at our families in our districts, and just go to them and say, like, what are the things that we're missing here? What are the things that you need? And then figure out ways to accomplish getting that. I know that there are teachers that you know, don't have access to internet where they live, and they're being asked to remote teach. And it's difficult. Are we going to the building? Are we staying at home? So I just think, you know, listen to the people that we're here to serve. I'm always like a reverse model. The way I look at things, kind of the same way as like a reverse customer service model, that the CEO is there to serve the customers, not the other way around. I look at education the same way. And I think that we really need to, as a whole, like as a system, we need to look at it that way, that we're here to serve our students and families, not the other way around. So we need to be going to them and saying, like, what is it that you need from us so that we can make sure that we're best serving your needs.
Yeah, great. That makes so much sense. I'd like to, go ahead. Yes, Amy.
Can
absolutely.
I piggyback on that? And I want to add, I was reading some of the questions in the comments, and I wanted to just piggyback off of what Robert was saying. And some of the questions in the comments have to do with our parent voices being considered. And I've been fortunate this year to be working at the state level, and in the state level guidance, obviously we have local control in our state, but there were parent voices. And I think a lot of districts, I know the district I work in has had some parent voice in the conversations. I was so excited to be in a school board meeting last night where the school board members were asking questions that were hearing the heart of families, that with two parents working and with kids. And I think that it's so hard. We are making, unfortunately, decisions are being made that are going to impact families with these considerations in mind. And I don't want to dismiss that. But I do think there needs to be a sense of urgency around what Nate is talking about, getting the plans out early. How are we supporting families and understanding what we are doing that sees your need? How are we reaching out to families who have a few kids in the district, who may have working parents, and what are we making available that meets that need? And I think if you are a parent on this webinar and are feeling disenfranchised, please reach out to your superintendent and your school board or your teachers, maybe just teachers, for questions about what is it, because I think we need to have clear communication, requesting clear communication on what standards we need to teach, how you're going to teach it, how you're going to communicate that. That's good information for you to have. Knowing the parameters for which the decisions are being made, that's good information for you to have and can help you understand making personal decisions. There was a counselor who said, what's a counselor's role in this? And I was in a really good webinar the other day, and they said, right now it's all hands on deck. Really? We should not be, as we're having professional development, we need to be getting information to classified staff, to counselors, to associate principals, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all our diverse learners. I don't know what your job is, but there is a job. Like, maybe you're finding the families with multiple kids and no childcare who need you. And so I think that's the perspective we need to take. There are going to be people who obviously are disproportionately impacted. I don't want to dismiss or demean that at all, because this is horrifying, but make sure you reach out for help, and we'll try, and the help might just be communication, and we'll try and get all our hands on deck.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. I'd like to open it up now to questions. So if you have a question for the teachers, we've got about maybe 15 minutes or so. Feel free to put it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. No question is too basic. And the first question I have here is about the impact of racial equity, which is, with a disparity in populations of color, how will this time either help or hurt students in these communities?
I think one thing we have to do, it's not back down
please.
from, oops, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say, districts in this direct work around racial equity and culturally responsive classroom management, all of those pieces that if you were working or not working on them in the past, do not put those initiatives on hold due to this craziness. I really appreciated the leadership of our superintendent, our school board this spring in Quincy. And we had been working for the last 3 years on working towards a race and equity plan, a policy. And it had gone up for first reading at our school board the week before COVID closure happened. And so it kind of got put on the table for a couple months there. But then in June, right when everything was happening around George Floyd's murder and the protests started happening, they said, no, we have to bring this back up and we have to get this through. And they unanimously passed that. And now, even in the midst of, deciding to go remote learning, we have a culturally responsive classroom management training coming from the WEA that they said, nope, we're going to go right ahead and do that, because this is essential regardless of what our learning model is that we're using. We have to do this. And so just staying committed to those types of initiatives and personally and as an organization is critical all the way throughout this. We can't let it get put on the back burner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
I would add that these issues of racial justice are more important now than ever, because the populations are being impacted. So schools are closing because of a viral outbreak, and that viral outbreak is disproportionately impacting Black and brown and low-income families, who are always disproportionately impacted in our school systems. And so we have to be more cognizant than normal, more cognizant than ever of those impacts, and making sure that we're not leaving those families behind, because they're the ones that are most likely to lack home internet, to lack a stable food supply, to lack stable housing, to lack. And so that equity work, it needs to be at the forefront of our work. I've been thinking a lot about like what my teaching practice is gonna look like in 2020. And like, I'm the hard ass of the group. Like I'm not touchy-feely, like that's not who I am. But relationships and building rapport and making sure my students' needs are taken care of is going to be more present in my teaching this year than it ever has been.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I have a follow-up question, which is, how are you planning to build the relevant learning of today into your teaching? COVID-19, social justice, and climate warming.
So there was actually a question on the chat that is related to that asked Nate to elaborate on what engaging teaching looks like. And I think, Arik, that question answers that. Like, kids want to talk about what's happening right now, and they want to relate it to, like, say, Nate is probably the best one to answer this question, actually, because he is so good at incorporating current events and everything into what he does. But he also teaches us a subject that lends itself to that. But I think that every educator can be doing this. Like, we need to be talking about how the pandemic is impacting not only the United States and our direct communities, but also the world. We need to be talking about Black Lives Matter. We need to be saying that out loud. We need to be bringing those histories and all of that into our lessons in our classrooms. That's engaging teaching, but I would really love to hear Nate's thoughts on this.
Sure. When I think about engagement in my classroom, I think about the idea of relevance, the idea of choice. And so much of instruction that happens in schools is not relevant to students and like where they are. So I'm privileged. This year I'm teaching AP Government Politics during an election year. So I get to walk in every day and be like, look at this tweet, look at this poll, look at this headline, right? That's easy. Not everybody has it as easy as I do, but what I would say is that whatever course you're teaching this year, because here's the thing, is that this generation that's coming up right now are very savvy consumers. And if they don't see value in it, they're gonna opt out, particularly if they're at home. And so instruction has to be relevant, has to hit them where they live, has to hit them in their interests, and then they have to have choice in instruction. One of the things that I've done in my classroom in remote learning last year, we made a decision to let students decide on our final unit. And so we gave them a list of options, and then they voted on the option that they wanted to talk about. And so, engagement was through the roof because they were getting what they wanted. Our jobs as teachers is to teach students a set of skills, but we shouldn't be wedded to our materials and our choices. We should be willing to adapt our materials and choices to the needs of our students in our classrooms. And again, like, if you do that, if your instruction is relevant to students' lives and events and students have choice, then like they're gonna be bought in, period.
And they're gonna show up.
Yep.
Every day. And they're gonna be engaged.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I've got another question here about partners. So how can education partners like PTA help the most right now? And Camille, you had some thoughts about that.
Yeah, so that's the work that I'm just starting with the team around family engagement, including some of our parent groups. And one of the ideas that's come up over the summer, I'm excited to put out to them, is if we could have those teams kind of create almost like buddy groups of families within our schools and reach out to all the families in the school and say, okay, who felt successful with the way things went last year, or at least that you understood how to turn your Chromebook on with your student and get them into the learning that they needed. That could be technology and academic supports for parents, because our staff, we're a small school district, our staff capacity and our IT department capacity is limited. And so if we could use our parent volunteer groups as networks that can then support smaller groups of families throughout our schools, I think that could be a really great way to leverage them and leverage the expertise of parents, and then provide more direct support to parents from other parents going through the same thing as well.
That's great. Thank you very much. So here's kind of a follow-up question to that, which is, how can parents gear up to support their student at home? Are there tools or resources that are available?
I'm hopeful that districts are considering these things. I know a few of the district's board meetings that I've been in, they've been talking about how they're going to be creating materials that help support families, how to use the LMS, the learning management systems that we're talking about, and how communication will be in different languages and on different platforms. And
yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think that when parents need to know how to support their kids, because that's going to be different district to district, that's on the district to make sure that they are providing that support for families. And I think families need to be pushing on the district to provide that support. One of the questions that I constantly ask is, because there's a lot of, and this is something that Amy and I have talked about actually, is there's a lot of conversation around special education in particular, and how you can meet the needs of special education students. And I would say that this is also a similar conversation around teaching English language learners. And one of the questions I always ask if I'm in those conversations, I wish I was in more of them, one of the questions I always ask is, how are you partnering with parents to ensure that they know what did it look like in your classroom? What kinds of things did you do to help meet the needs of the students? And how can you share that responsibility with parents and give them the tools and skills they need in order to be able to do that? And I will say that there's going to be no magic, website that you can go to as a parent to be like, how do I support my child in remote learning? There might be some generalities out there, but it's really up to the district. Like Spokane Public Schools is going to use Teams. They have said that every single classroom is going to use Microsoft Teams. Well, there better be an opportunity and lots of flexible opportunities for parents to access that kind of training. Otherwise, so I say, get together, parents, push on the school district. They need to be helping you understand how to help your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like Camille said, I think one of the benefits of all of our school districts moving to singular LMS, singular platforms, some Schoology, some Google Classroom, some whatever you're using, with the whole district on the same program, you have a broader network now. The kid down the street is using the same platform as your kid. So hopefully you won't feel like you can only contact your teacher directly to get help on your specific problem. Districts should be building in tech support, district support, but you can also hopefully text somebody. So,
well, and also I just got an email yesterday that the Association of ESDs at the state level is developing a series of training supports for families specifically. That's not been announced exactly what that's going to look like yet, but you can look into that on their website or social media networks. I'm sure we'll have more information about that in the next couple of weeks as well. There was another piece to that I wanted to speak to, and I lost my thought, so I'll have to bring it back when I get it.
That's okay. I've got a couple of questions about teaching, actually, from teachers. One of them says, are your school districts offering any training to teach remotely on how to use these learning platforms like Schoology? Or are they just having to fend for themselves?
So piggybacking on that, the AESD also is having a lot of opportunities for trainings, and CSTEP, the Washington Center for Strengthening the Teaching Profession. They both have some great resources and opportunities, webinars, trainings that are offered for free to teachers throughout the state on all of the major 5 learning management platforms. If you're in North Central Washington, there's also a STEM Summit being offered the next 2 weeks in August that offer training courses and all of those things. And then in Quincy, our school district is using 2 of our lid days at the start of school to do kind of a tier differentiated series of workshops and trainings for teachers. We didn't have a common platform in the spring, and so we have a lot of variation in how teachers are prepared to use Google Classroom, which is going to be our tool this year. So we tried to be really intentional about differentiating that support for teachers too.
Great. This is a question for Robert. As a CTE automotive teacher, I'm concerned with the opportunity of students. As with Robert's class, working with your hands is a fundamental skill. I'll be filming lessons out of my garage. I can teach theory, but not hands-on. What suggestions do you have?
Yeah, well, that's tough. And I feel your pain doing hands-on classes from a distance. We just, had a conversation in my CTE department about that recently too. And I think that, what you suggested right there about doing videos in your garage and showing them how to do it like that, that's a great start to be able to do it. I think there are going to be some limitations that we can't overcome during this time that we just have to, unfortunately, deal with that. Like if students don't have opportunities at home to do the hands-on stuff that we need them to do, the best opportunities we can provide visually to show them this is how you do it. I know I'm a visual learner myself, so like even having those videos explaining and watching you walk through step by step and seeing how to do it would definitely help. And if you provide opportunities where if you can find ways, like one good thing is like doing a choice board. I used those a little bit back in spring, and I'm using those coming up now too. And I teach, like, I'm family and consumer sciences and leadership, and then now I'm also teaching audio engineering and sound production. That's a new class to me. I have a background in music production anyways, and a passion for it, but I'm trying to figure out how to teach this brand new class to me, teaching students how to produce music from homes where they don't have a music studio. And so I'm having to find all kinds of innovative ways to be able to roll that class out for them. And then, you know, our cooking classes, but providing a choice board of some kind where you can provide different opportunities, because a kid might not have a car in the garage that they can go and do exactly what you showed them, but they might have other opportunities for hands-on learning if you can give them some different choices that they can actually choose from that fits what they can do at home. And I know that's hard for us, because like instead of teaching this one thing, it's like, okay, now I got to come up with these different methods for them to learn it and different ways for me to actually assess if they learned it. That's tough on us, I know. But ultimately, I think that's stuff we should be doing in our classes anyways. Like when Nate said before about giving kids choice over what they learn and how they learn it, I think if we can provide that, especially through CTE classes right now, think about what the really important main standards are that you want them to learn, show them how to do it, and then give them choices to show you back that they learned how to do it, I think is a good opportunity right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Go ahead, Camille.
I remembered my thought, Arik. Can I share it?
Please, go for it.
It was back when we were talking about family engagement and support. I heard a plan from Bellingham this week for their K-1 classes in particular. They're planning to have their teachers meet weekly with each family, according to family scheduling considerations for their K-1 students. And so that's built in as part of their instructional time. And I thought that was just a really great idea, because they know that the parents are going to be providing so much of the instruction for especially the early learners. And then in addition, the first 2 weeks of school are going to be all focused on supporting and training students and families around what are the main learning objectives we're going to have for this year, what are the tools that you're going to have to use those, how do you use those tools, and working through all that. So I just thought they had a really great plan in place for their early learners and how to support their students and families.
Great, thank you so much. We've got time for about 2 more questions, and this one's about student supports. I'm looking for insights, conflicts coming up about bringing in kids for interventions versus supporting kids to have situations that don't need in-person interventions. Can you talk about this conflict? And I see that in terms of potentially wraparound supports or special education. So I think about Mandy, Nate, Amy. This sounds like it might be right up your alley.
Amy, so, you're leaning in, go ahead.
I was also typing a response. I can go with for kids who need specially designed instruction, I kept going back to the IEP. And again, with that idea of creating choice and materials that are constructed for parent use, taking each IEP goal and saying, you know, in a classroom, I would do direct instruction and it might look like this, but that's not necessarily an option at home right now. So the skill that we're targeting for your student to work on, you could practice that skill by having them do this, or doing, you know, if it's all kinds of reading things. Maybe if you are on the internet and you have them read something like that, like giving alternative choices of how to practice discrete skills in different ways that happen in the home and can happen naturalistically, especially for students who may not want to engage in the learning, or the learning in a very sit and get style is not natural. So that's one thing that I did to support families. I know that as we're talking about bringing kids back into schools, I was able to do some in-person instruction during the summer. And I think it is going to take, there were special masks, we had shields, we had plexiglass, we had distancing, but it's something that we would have a very hard time upscaling. But I think that it will be able to start having conversations around how are we meeting student needs in a variety of ways. If we're sending things into the home, what's functional? If we're bringing kids back to school, how do we prioritize safety while giving instruction? So I know that was a lot of answers to say there isn't a right answer. But like Robert said, we're getting creative. We're teaching to a new normal.
Right. And can I just say that, so there's a lot of, right now, a lot of the conversation is around what services the teachers in the environment can provide. But in the chat, there was also a question about counselors and how we can, what should counselors be doing at this time? And we have, all, like mental health therapists in some of our schools. We have counselors. We also have educational support professionals. And I think we need to be really creative in how we're utilizing the different staff members within a school building, and think outside of the traditional, aspects of those positions. How can we utilize the skills and knowledge and experience of our counselors to be reaching out to students? How can we be using the skills, experience, and expertise of our educational support professionals, like our para-educators, in also reaching out to our students, especially ones who are trained in English language learning or the special education ones? We have a difficult time in education, especially in the United States, thinking outside of a traditional model or thinking outside of specific job descriptions. And I think this is our opportunity to really examine those processes and those skill sets and those experiences and expertise, to be using them in a manner that's going to be beneficial and at the end of the day create more equity, and possibly be able to use once we are back inside the building altogether. And so that's what we need to be doing. We need to be looking at, we need wraparound services. We need mental health therapy. There's constantly discussions around CPS and how calls have gone down because teachers aren't directly in. Well, what are we doing as a community to ensure that it's not only educators' eyes that are on the kids reporting abuse? These are the things that we need to be talking about, not to mention that we wouldn't be having this gigantic conversation around the value and the importance of schools, particularly in terms of the very basic need for childcare, if we had government decisions that allowed us to continue to survive and live for several months to take care of the pandemic, so we wouldn't even be in this situation. And so we need to be thinking about not what schools do and how schools can lead in this, but rather how we can come together as a community and figure out, why do we have trauma? Why do we have mental health issues? Why do we have equity issues? Why do we need to say daily Black Lives Matter? What can we do as a society to ensure that we are all taken care of?
Yeah, Nate, you were about to say something too. Thank you, Mandy.
No, I wasn't.
Agree.
Nope, I'm good. Nope, that was everything Mandy said. Just pick up what Mandy said.
All right. I have time for one last question, which is, how do you make decisions on what resources to incorporate into your distance teaching? I work for the local PBS station, and we have a lot of great resources, including educational programming blocks on our free broadcast channels. And these resources are available on the OSPI website, but I know educators are bombarded with so many resources. How do you sort through all this?
I've talked before about, as a social studies teacher, my role is evolving from being the creator of content to the curator of content. And I think that something that's happening right now is that teachers are honestly like drowning in resources. That said, I saw this question in the chat. Person from PBS, nathan.bowling@gmail.com. Let's talk afterwards. But what I would say is that content providers who want to link up with teachers may need to go out and actually solicit and meet with teachers, not in person, but have conversations, because a lot of teachers I know are going to be drowning in the fall. A lot of teachers are going to be working on trying to support their students, trying to deliver their instruction the best way they know how to adapt their prior curriculum to this online learning environment. And I'm not a parent, but there are many, many teachers, the majority of teachers are parents, and I'm trying to imagine how to do all of this while being responsible for sentient human beings as well. And so like, so I would just say to folks who have services like that, information like that, reach out to teachers. And what I would say is that like I can make my role, or I pledge to make my role to be an amplifier of resources. If you reach out to me, I'm going to regret this problem, but if you reach out to me, I will disseminate the information to people who I roll with as well.
Mm. Yeah, Mandy, Camille, Robert, Amy, how are you choosing resources?
Just on a very basic level, look for resources that don't offer platitudes, but rather offer specific strategies and examples that will actually help you. Because there's so many articles out there, and believe me, I know, because I have to cull it. I have to go through all of it constantly to figure out what to share on the social media for Washington Education Association. And there's so many things that will give you a list of these are the things, but it's all platitudes. It's all like work on relationships. Well, how do you do that? So look for those resources that are actually giving you concrete ways that you can actually accomplish these things. And reach out to your colleagues. One of the biggest problems in education is that we don't value the teachers that we work with. And that's not just us as educators, it's also the district leaders and the building leaders. There's so much expertise in your building. Like if I could can my child's 2 teachers that he had last year and how amazing they did in getting us to do remote teaching, if someone would say, hey, these 2 teachers, how about you tell us what you did? And then other people could learn from that. Like, how amazing would that be? Let's value our own expertise and experience.
I was going to say the same thing, Mandy. That's how we've tried to kind of narrow the fire hose here, is just say, all right, we've got teachers that have a handle on this or are really excited about digging deep into the resources, and we're going to put them on it, and they're going to develop a model and share it with their team for feedback. And that's where we're going to go. We're just going to, focus a little bit more because it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Robert, Amy, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I agree. I think that for teachers, like, we are each other's greatest resources and probably most underutilized resources oftentimes. Like, we oftentimes work in silos. We get into our own rooms and kind of forget about what everybody else is doing. And I think a lot of times people are afraid maybe to put themselves out there also and say like, hey, I'm going to share with my staff this really cool thing, because it feels sometimes like, hey, look at what I'm doing. Look how great I am. And it isn't about that. It needs to be for us to be able to put that kind of stuff aside and say, like, we can share openly the things that we're doing, asking each other questions about what other people are doing. And it's not a game of comparison. It's not like, hey, look at this really cool thing I put together to show you like how much better than you I am. Like, that's not the point. The point is just like, we have the ability to utilize each other's knowledge and experience and strengths. And we have to be able to like rely on each other to hold each other up through this time and learn from each other in that way. And utilize instructional coaches. Like, a lot of times, schools have instructional coaches whose role is to do exactly that, to help people learn those systems and learn, find new strategies. And oftentimes we don't utilize those things that are there. So I think if we have instructional coaches, go to them, utilize them, put yourself out there, share lessons with each other, not to compare, but just to like say, hey, here's something I came across that's really cool. And like, maybe I don't have it nailed yet either, but I think that if we can really work as teachers on collaborating and finding ways to uplift and support the work that each other is doing, I think that we'll all benefit from that. And then I think also just remembering, put yourself in the shoes of the families that you're putting this stuff out to, and remember that, you could have all these different things that are being thrown at a family that has maybe 4 kids that are at different schools with different teachers. And they're like, to you, it's like, okay, I have these 2 things and I know how to use them really well. Oh, just do this, click here. It's really easy. And that language is really difficult, because when you say that, it makes people feel like, okay, well, it's really easy. Why am I not getting this? It may not be really easy, and they may have 15 of those things that they're trying to learn that they've never seen, and you may be more of an expert on it. So just trying to kind of find those tools that are going to support them, streamline it as much as possible. Don't tell people it's easy. Say like, here, there's a way to learn it. I'm here to help you learn it, and be there and available to answer those questions, man. But like, it takes a team. And I think everybody that works in a school is an educator, and we may all have different roles, but we're on the same team. And we have to be able to hold each other up and get through this together as a team of educators that's there to support our students and families.
Yeah, Amy, you are nodding your head a bunch there.
Yes, yes, yes. Everything everybody said. And I've learned so much in the last 6 months. And I've learned it from colleagues, and I've learned it from families, and I've learned it from students. And I think in all of this, as we're talking about social justice, as we're talking about equity, for in this country, how are we asking hard questions? How are we asking children, is this working? How do you feel? And be ready to listen to the answer. I am scared. I am angry. I don't feel seen. And how are we reacting to that? How are we asking them for help? Because it's going to start, the answers are in our communities, and validating the experiences, hearing the experiences, and not letting my perception of what Nate is going through or what Mandy's going through color my reaction or my instruction. That's when we're going to really start to make some decisions that move the system forward. And I think that, so yes, everything they say, share what's working for you, and then ask, hey, I did this thing. Did it work for you when I did that? And learn from each other. So it's a big job. I think we'll all be learning the rest of our careers, and hopefully we'll just keep growing this.
Well, thank you, Amy, Robert, Mandy, Camille, and Nate. And thanks to everyone who submitted questions and participating through the chat. If your question wasn't answered, teachers, would it be okay if they contact you through Twitter?
Absolutely.
Okay, a lot of nodding heads. That's excellent. I'll include that in the follow-up email. That'll be coming into your inbox in about 24 hours. We know that these have been extraordinary times, and school this fall is not going to simply go back to what it once was. This creates enormous challenges for parents and families across our state. Many school leaders are doing their best to find solutions that are innovative, allowing learning to continue while maintaining safety for kids and teachers. We would love to hear from you here at League of Education Voters. Is your school trying something innovative that others could learn from this fall? Did your district involve you in creating the solution? What are your hopes and dreams for the coming year? Send us your thoughts, things that are working, things that you wish someone could try in the coming year as we all grapple with this. We're collecting your ideas so that everyone will be able to learn from each other. And we would love to shine a light on success stories out there. Send your ideas to info@educationvoters.org. Our next LEVinar is this coming Tuesday, August 11th. Highline School District Superintendent Susan Enfield, Kent Superintendent Calvin Watts, North Shore Superintendent Michelle Reed, Bellingham Superintendent Greg Baker, Kennewick Superintendent Tracy Pierce, and Davenport Superintendent Jim Kowalkowski will share how racial equity is being addressed during this historic time, describe what school will look like in their district for the start of the school year, and will outline what kinds of support districts in Washington need from the state as school gets underway. They'll also answer your questions. You can register by visiting our website, educationvoters.org, clicking on events, then lunchtime webinars. And I'll also send you registration information in a follow-up email. Also, on October 8th, please join us for a statewide virtual free convening around racial equity and education. First, we'll hear from Dr. Benjamin Danielson, director of the Odessa Brown Children's Clinic in Seattle, exploring the role of racial equity, diversity, access, and inclusion in our public education system. And then join us as we break into groups to discuss the issue together. Thank you for each of you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or comments, please send them to Arik@educationvoters.org. That's ARIK@educationvoters.org. A recording of today's presentation with closed captioning will be available on our website, educationvoters.org, and it will be sent to you in a follow-up email, which you should get in about 24 hours. Feel free to share the recording with your friends and colleagues. If you would like to learn more about League of Education Voters or support our work, please visit our website, educationvoters.org. Thank you for attending. Each of us has the right to feel safe and valued. Together, we will fight for a world in which true educational and economic equity exists. We look forward to seeing you in future LEVinars. Amy, Robert, Mandy, Camille, and Nate, Thank you so much for joining us. You are rock stars, and I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate everything you bring to the world.
Thanks for having us, Arik.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.